It's been a quarter century since the rise of the first-person video games, and in that time, we've seen technology grow and expand what developers are able to do in a 3D space. But for all the major advancements that have come along, there's still one thing developers can't seem to get right, and that's first-person platforming. That's not to say that it's never been done well, but more times than not, it's the worst part of the game. That's why I went into SkyTime with a lot of concerns. It's hard enough for industry veterans to get first-person platforming right, so I'm always a little skeptical when a first-time developer steps up and bases their entire game around that mechanic. As it turns out, I was right to be concerned. SkyTime's the kind of game where I knew something was seriously wrong right from the opening cinema. I guess the game revolves around a brilliant scientist who lost his family on a ski trip, but honestly, I'm not sure. I couldn't understand one of the lines of dialogue or how it connected to this game, which has absolutely nothing to do with mountains, snow, or even skiing. I guess it sets up an adventure where our hero Zachary is forced to save his family from something or someone. I honestly don't know. Regardless of what the story's trying to say, SkyTime is essentially a racing game where you jump from building to building before time runs out. Think of it as a Mirror's Edge racer, only without the parkour, story, good controls, interesting characters, or anything people actually liked about that series. The result is a short and uneven first-person platformer where you're hundreds of feet in the air and doing everything in your power to not fall. So, it's probably worth mentioning that Zachary is something of a superhero. Not only does gravity not affect him like everybody else, but he also has a stopwatch that slows down time. This power will help the distraught father jump even further than he normally would, allowing for some truly epic moments where he's jumping from one skyscraper to another while bullets are flying in all directions. Who cares if it doesn't make any sense? The idea of a foot race far above the city is a concept that immediately grabs my attention. Too bad it lets go just as quickly. As both a first-person platformer and a racing game, SkyTime is a miserable failure. For starters, every level looks exactly the same. You'll see the same flying cars, the same skyscrapers, and the same gun turrets in every single stage. And they never even change the time of day or the weather effects, it just always looks exactly the same, no matter what level you're playing. And since there are only 9 courses to choose from, you'll have no problem beating the game in a single sitting. Of course, the issues don't end with a few repetitive backgrounds. The real problem with SkyTime is the gameplay, which simply isn't up to the task of racing high above the city. The buttons are often unresponsive, and the platforming feels slippery, 2 things you definitely don't want in a racing game where every second matters. And it's actually worse than that, because the jump button will make the characters bounce multiple times, often right off the side of a flying car. And did I mention this game gives you no way of adjusting the settings? Look, I prefer an inverted look, which is something that isn't offered in this game. A game released in 2018. How does that even happen? This made huge chunks of the game a whole lot more frustrating than they should have been, especially when you're supposed to jump and destroy gun turrets at the same time. This is a game where you need precise first-person controls, and yet the game gives you no way to make the much-needed adjustments. Another problem is that the course designs are terrible. I already mentioned they all look the same, but the obstacles aren't that much fun to overcome. There are a couple of stages that feel like everything's placed at random, to the point where it's not even clear where you're supposed to go half the time. And the trial and error pathfinding is only made worse by the repetitive soundtrack, which repeats the same 30-second loop until you've either gone insane or thrown the system out the window. There's nothing about this game that I can recommend. While the idea of racing high above the city certainly sounds like a good time, SkyTime is a miserable experience that is the worst of first-person platforming. The gameplay is bad, the graphics are dated, every stage looks the same, it's not always clear where you're supposed to go, and there's no way to adjust the settings. It's inept in almost every conceivable way. I don't care how much you want to jump on skyscrapers and flying cars, SkyTime should be avoided at all costs. Hey, thanks for watching our review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. So here's the question I have for you. What is a video game pet peeve you want to see fixed? I already mentioned how developers can't seem to get first-person platforming right, but there's so many more I could complain about. I can't wait to see your picks in the comments below. Looking ahead, I have reviews for Halloween Forever, Call of Cthulhu, and Siberian, the time-traveling warrior, going live in the coming days. We're also going to be answering your questions on Friday's mailbag episode. In the meantime, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,